The clap. All right. Welcome in. I'm Katie for anyone who I am seeing for the first time, or at least meeting virtually for the first time.
Haley, good to see you all. A
And
lot
for,
of wonderful, familiar faces.
yes, I was going to say for a few of you, this is your very first NME implementation call. So welcome. We had 2 study groups start this week. So we have some new folks entering the NME trainer program, which is very exciting. And then it's great to see some of the familiar faces from years before. So thanks for being here. We have a pretty packed call today, so we will jump in. We're going to move through some guest presenters, some clips, the maintenance activity. It should be pretty fun. Some announcements for things coming up. We also wanted to celebrate that we had a really exciting month, I would say, of seeing NME trainers. So we were able to go to the Foster Youth Conference with, I see Mindy on the screen right now, and I'm sure there might be more here, but I just can't see in my squares. Um, but we were able to go out to California. And if you ever have any way to get to that Foster Youth Conference, it is one of the most phenomenal events I've ever been to. Haley and I
You probably need to ask
yeah,
if you can go.
yeah. Mindy's like, don't just
Flooding their
invite people.
conference, but
It was tremendous, and we got to see a lot of great NME folks there, and just see the work in action, which I think is so exciting.
Kelly Rizzi, lots of praise for Shasta and the amazing
Yes.
things your team are doing to spread the good work.
Yeah, and I think one of the cool things is we're just starting to see more and more people realize they're not an island, that there's lots of folks doing this work in cool ways, and they're not alone, which is great. And then we also got to go to Arizona and attend the neurosequential. I always want to call it Glowing and Growing, but that wasn't what it's called, Grounded and Growing. The conference that they set up in Arizona, it was amazing, and it was folks from NMT, NMC, NME, and even some NM Sport there. We have a little picture of the crew we can show you that presented. Mike, we're shouting you.
I've asked your permission,
But we had some amazing presenting from Lainey and Mike and Dawn and so many of our Sonia, so many of our NME folks there. So we got to see them present and do a panel, which was really cool. But anyways, we hope you're also getting those little boosts in your day to day with this kind of work because it's very exciting. Any announcements or celebrations from your side of the screen before we jump into today's program?
There's a handful of people on the call who I believe just got their certificates in the last few months. So congratulations to those of you who have finished either the NME trainer or the advanced trainer. That is, as we know, hundreds of hours of work. So congratulations to those of you, and to those of you who are just getting started. I'm sure they would agree it's hundreds of hours of joyful work that no one ever minded doing.
So many videos you'll hear in your
Yeah.
All right. Well, we have some presenters in person here today. We also have a clip from Dr. Perry that we're going to share. So we'll start with the Dr. Perry clip, and then we're going to jump to I think in person today we have Miranda, Taylor, and Jackie. And then if time allows, we'll get to some of our other clips from Kristen and Julie. So I will we're going to mute. We'll turn it on. If you can't hear, of course, flag us, but typically it's if you have your volume turned up, it should work pretty well.
And just respecting the sequence of engagement, for those of you who read in the email that we'll be talking about the maintenance activity, we will. We're going to get to the content first in case folks need to leave and want to get that first. And then we'll talk about the maintenance activity. But just to put everyone's mind at rest, it's a link that Emily already added to the NM portal, and it is just very self-explanatory. So we will talk about it, but
no stress.
The last thing it should feel like is stressful. I mean, you can feel however you please, but it should hopefully not be stressful. So, Kay, do I have sharing permission?
Supposedly.
Dr. P should be live next month to share some new content, some new slides talking about sort of working memory and introducing new content. We were able to snag him for a recording for this month, with the lens really being on effective repetitions. The wonderful folks who are going to share today are going to talk about different strategies they use in the classroom. Some of these are things that you just do every now and then. Some of these are things that you do all day, every day. Miss McCool talks about how she uses a script with adults in order to support them and supporting students to get the most repetitions possible for her students. And so we really wanted to connect some of these strategies with also this science from Dr. Perry of talking about effective repetitions, because that is one of the larger hurdles for some of us in education. Is even if we know a great strategy with a student, we might only be with them for a few moments a week, or we might only have them for 1 hour a day. And we know that brain change requires a lot of effective repetition. So that is what we're getting at with this. So I'm going to share it. There should be sound right away. If you don't hear it, please put something in the chat or
Wave wildly. I'll try to watch them.
But the same principle happens with the acquisition of motor capability. So one of the things I do want to do a little didactic about a concept that we'll probably elaborate quite a bit more in some of our future teachings, and that is the concept of effective repetitions. Not just repetitions, but effective repetitions. Here's a slide. You may be familiar with this. Some of you, I showed something like this a few sessions previously. This is sort of the distribution of any functional capacity in the population. And this could be, literacy skills, this could be motor skills, this could be social skills. One of the most common sort of functional capabilities that we test and then we demonstrate in this normal curve is IQ. But this isn't just IQ, but this is kind of a related concept that it's just a functional capability within the population. So, and again, there's a couple things to remember. These are hypotheticals. There are certain traits that are just not distributed in a normal distribution. There are certain traits that are distributed in they have an unusual curve. They'll have a different mathematics. Some things are present in a bimodal distribution, but for our purposes, just to make this point, I'm going to sort of talk about these, the range of capabilities as existing on a normal distribution. So let me erase all this stuff. Okay. So that's what this is. Here's high functional capability, here's low functional capability. And one of the things that has to do with being highly functional is that usually mastery in a given functional capability is associated with ease of learning. How many repetitions are required for you to sort of build on that skill? So there are some people, and I've known some of these guys that I grew up with that were athletes, that you could show them, like, demonstrate one thing and they would very quickly be able to replicate a complex motor activity. You're like, wow, how the hell did you do that? But they're just put together that way. However they got that way, that's the way they are. And then there's some people like me, you could show me 1,000,000 times and I still can't do it. And now those very same people, as we've talked about before, when we talked about this, they may have a different distribution of capabilities, right? Cognitive may be down here. They may be very socially gifted, and they may have poor regulation skills. So different people have different distributions of these functional capabilities. The focus of this part of this presentation, though, is about how these functional capabilities emerge and how they change as a function of repetitions. So we have this RR over here. That's repetitions required. I'm probably going to change this. I might not change this exactly yet, but I have to figure out the best way to show this. If you have a population that exists on this normal distribution, there's a couple things that I want to show. First of all is that we know that all functions will shift as dependent upon state. So the more dysregulated you are, this person who essentially had high functional capability is all of a sudden has average functional capability in some skill, right? So we've talked about this before. You have a high IQ, you under a lot of duress, and you're in a situation, you're on the stand and you're challenged, and you can't cognitively pull down stuff that you know as efficiently as you did before, right? And as soon as you get off the stand and you're driving home, all of a sudden, all the stuff that you should have said, you go, oh my God, I can't believe I forgot to say that study and this and that and blah, blah, blah. That's the shift in functional capability, which happens with motor skill, social skill, cognitive skills when we're under duress. I, for example, when I'm kind of socially anxious, I get into a social situation, I literally cannot remember the name of a person I'm just introduced to. It's so freaking embarrassing. Literally to say, hi, my name is Bill, and they'll walk over, and then someone else comes up, and I'm like, this is uh uh that's because I get anxious and my cognitive short-term memory skills and retrieval skills are just gone. So you guys all know this, you teach this all the time. I want to connect this a little bit to repetitions. So let me use this. So if you start to look at the number of repetitions required for somebody who has high functional capability, and they're kind of on this end of the spectrum, the place that they intersect with this curve kind of tells you how many repetitions are required for this person to essentially add to their functional capability, right? It takes 20 repetitions for me to sort of modify my existing capabilities in cognition or social or motor capabilities. However, under duress, what happens is with this shift in functional capability, all of a sudden the number of repetitions for me required to remember somebody's name goes from 20 to 120. Now, this is really important because so many of the children we work with either have a sensitivity, they're sensitized so that they very quickly go from here to here under any challenge situation, or they're chronically activated because there's been this state-dependent shift in their state reactivity curve, right? And so what that means is when you are a teacher and you give the average student, let's go back over here, and let's say you have an average student, and the average student is going to require 100 and some repetitions to learn something. But if you have a dysregulated kid and they're over here, you're going to have to give them 750 repetitions. And so if your expectation is that I'm going to give you 100 opportunities to learn this word and learn this word, I'll say this word, I'll say this word, I'll repeat it, and everybody else is mastering this and Billy's not getting it, then we start to give Billy labels. He's not very smart. And then, of course, the other thing that happens, as you all know, if you give children the typical number of repetitions, right? The typical number of repetitions that would get them kind of to a point of mastery, you're essentially going to leave behind a huge percentage of these kids over here who require lots of repetitions. And they just fall further and further and further behind. And the key thing is that it's what really matters in terms of this curve is that the reason this goes from 20 to 120 is because essentially 100 of the repetitions are ineffective. They're not effective because they're not getting up into the part of the cortex involved in name remembering. They just get short circuited. You could tell me his name a million times when I'm under duress and I'll forget it a million times. And I think that this is when we start to think about and talk with parents and teachers about effective repetitions. Was that an effective repetition? Was he safe and calm? Was he actually able to get the content to his cortex? Yes or no? That's an effective repetition. If they're hungry, thirsty, full bladder, scared, sleep deprived, you will not be giving them effective repetitions, even though you are giving a beautiful lecture. You are the best teacher on the planet because you have all this curricular content in your brain and you're spewing it out like crazy and providing all of these remarkably effective repetitions for kids who feel regulated. But you're not providing effective repetitions for kids that feel dysregulated. And so it's not the curriculum, it's not you, and it's really not the kid, it's the state of the kid. And so if we can't create a sense of safety, and you do that in lots of ways, I'll talk about this a lot, but if a child is in an environment where they feel like they belong, they feel respected, there's consistency, predictability, they know what to expect, you can minimize some of the factors that contribute to state-dependent shutdown and the experience of ineffective repetitions that leads to kids not progressing and to adults getting increasingly frustrated and giving up on kids. Anyway, that's what I'm going to say. I'm going to end the show. If you guys have any, happy to take any questions, comments, thoughts about this stuff.
That's the same kind of dynamic as test anxiety, something similar.
Exactly. I mean, not only is I was focusing on the internalizing new content in that set of slides, but that ability to retrieve existing content is also impacted by state dependence. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Mhm.
All right. Any other comments, thoughts?
One question, it went from 20 to 100 to 500 to 1,000. So maybe you said it and I missed it, but what is the exponentially higher number, the lower? Is that just because it takes that many more repetitions, their brain's not absorbing it as well, or?
You basically, it's because there's a logarithmic shift in what's going on, how you're going to get, it's essentially, I'm assuming there's a logarithmic shift when you're so threatened that you just aren't going to have any access to the cortex. And so you could do it 1,000 times. And as many of these parents will tell you, right? I've told him 1,000 times. And this is by way of example, Andrew. This isn't like, I haven't pulled this out of any research. It's actually, the original numbers came from athletic repetitions. And that's actually some of the best research on repetition and mastery comes from the people that study sport. And in part because you have such an easily observable set of things that you can look at. Plus, you can get a lot of repetition in sport, right? You can get 10,000 free throws that you can track. Whereas it's really hard to get 10,000 kind of tiny little bits of exposure to a specific cognitive concept. And if you did, teachers they would kill you. It's like, I'm not going to teach this sentence again. But in athletics, they're like, I want you to, do wall ball with lacrosse. I want you to dribble. I want you to shoot free throws. So you get the repetitions and you can see changes in mastery and so forth. But the same principle happens with the acquisition of motor capabilities. And that's kind of where the initial sort of selection of numbers came from.
Can I ask a further question on that, Dr. Perry? Hello? Oh.
Okay. There we go. All right. So hopefully you saw that as a little value to your repetitions. When you said you couldn't ask teachers to do that sentence 1,000 times, I was thinking how many of you were nodding and thinking, I have done that sentence 1,000 times. I have done that. So we'll open it up real quick. Just any questions or reflections on that little clip from Dr. Perry?
And Linda, if you're out here, we did forward your question on to Dr. Perry, and we'll let you know what he says.
Can I have a
Hi, Kevin.
Kevin.
how you all doing? Just a comment more than anything else. I'm going to wander a bit, so tell me shut up. I'm good at that. Kids call me names all day long. Um, the sports analogy is a good one, but you can only lift so much weight before your body says no more. It's not going to happen. And I spent a year, 9 months in classrooms, 3, 4, 5 times a day, 5 days a week, just repeating over and over again. And I find that the brain doesn't have a point at which it can no longer learn. It just constantly is absorbing my coming into a classroom. And since there's about 30 different languages in the school I'm in, I can speak like 5 or 6 low level, but enough to connect with them. So I do that every single day. And it seems to resonate with them. They don't ever start to slow down in learning. They actually pick up in more learning. They start
That's
using the language around their needs. And that helps them in the classroom then begin to open up to learn too. So I'm trying to compare the two and I can't. My brain doesn't go that way. In a sport, you can just lift so many weights as a gym rat, and I can't go any higher than that. And I'm an old man now anyway. But in the classroom, it seems limitless as long as you have the patience to go over and over and over and over again and not get exasperated. And when the kids see that, they start to feel more comfortable as well. They're not failing, they have somebody to guide them. Just a comment.
Yeah. It
Yeah.
kind of makes me think of state dependence, Kevin, because you could weightlift your entire life, right? So, but within a certain day, you hit a point of fatigue.
Mhm.
And we do see children hit a point of fatigue in the school day, right? By 3 p.m., a lot of times we'll see it's not that they can't learn anymore, but they're like, I have academic fatigue. And so now I'm going to wiggle or I'm no longer going to engage. And so you can be a lifelong learner, you can be a lifelong weightlifter, but it will be state dependent so that you don't hit that point of fatigue. But you must be offering positive repetitions, right? Because I do think if there was no reward or no relational sort of connection to make those effective repetitions, like he was talking about, you probably would see some walls from some of those students, but your environment and what you're doing is making it feel limitless, which is probably
Yeah.
the magic of the educator right there, right?
Yeah, and it probably takes about 2 months, September and October, for the faculty get used to me wandering into their classrooms. And I make a joke of it. A teacher will say to me, I'm going to make a couple of copies. Would you watch my students? I walk in the classroom and I put my hands up my eyes and I stare at them.
Binoculars.
I love it.
What are you doing? I was told to watch you. You know, their brains are all open. They're laughing and having a good time. The teacher comes in, what are you doing? He told me to watch your students. I put myself on the spectrum and have a good time. That's just how I do it. It's these little therapeutic doses that Dr. Perry talks about all the time.
Yeah. The micro moments.
Yep.
Yeah, Yvette, jump in.
Yeah, I mean, basically, it's like making the child that PC said about feeling safe and calm when doing the repetition, because it's not going to go in any other way. That's just, I see it all the time. Do you like me? Am I safe? Otherwise, they're not going to learn, right?
Yeah.
And I think it always makes me think about in, I don't know, high school when I would memorize something to survive a test, but I didn't internalize any of it. So I could regurgitate, but then later I'm like, ask me anything about the war of whatever year I was supposed to, and I don't know. Which I was like, those were not like that effective repetition because I just felt like I had to get it in so I could get it out, but I didn't retain it. I didn't connect it to relational or narrative. And so I think as a teacher, the effective repetitions piece is hard because sometimes we see rote repetition or compliance-based repetition. And like you're saying, yet compliance-based repetition is much different than regulated repetition as far as how our body and our brain are going to remember, process, and store those things. So yeah.
You'll remember your favorite teacher and what they taught you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah.
Well, that was a perfect segue to what we sort of prompted some of the folks who are going to share today with, which was to say, we said for classroom educators, how are you using the sequence of engagement to plan for yourself or your students? And we also asked OTs, what are some of those things you're doing that support regulation or, just some of those go-to practices that you have that might be critical for that one student, but could be good for all? Because I think that's one of the biggest things we hear is that regulate, relate, reason, we can't bypass it. And B, how do we do this whole class? Or if that's working for little Haley, could I replicate it for my whole classroom of kids? Is there something proprioceptive that's good for everyone? So that again, sort of was what we put forth to the folks that are going to share today was just how are you bringing that lens in? Because we don't get the luxury of saying, I'm going to teach it once and there it sits perfectly as I dropped it. Or of receiving individuals who are completely regulated or ready to learn the second they walk in our doors. So,
It's May in education. Everything's
Yes.
completely regulated in the United States, I'm sure. We're not
That's right.
like barrel rolling towards graduation and transitions in summer.
This is a great example of like joy, stress, terror, but they're all novel, they're all dysregulating, and some are great, some are less great. So, well, Jackie, I see you here. And Miranda and Taylor, if you're hiding out there too, maybe you can give me a wave or something in the chat. But Jackie, if you're up for it, if you have anything you want to throw in, we will pop over to you for a minute. And Jackie is a amazing advanced trainer who many of you probably know, but I'll let her introduce herself real quick.
Well, thanks for having us all. And this is a topic that, I could talk about for hours and hours, and they did not give me a time limit, but I'm going to go very short because I know we don't have a lot of time. As an occupational therapist, I work in schools, and I've been working in schools for many, many years. And you had mentioned we always think of proprioceptive input as kind of our universal regulator. And so for those that are not familiar with proprioceptive input, we're talking about a lot of that. It makes us feel grounded. It's that input that we put into our joints. So it just is this mind-body connector. So we talk about this in terms of heavy work or deep pressure. And so my go-to, what I've been talking about a lot lately regarding deep pressure is I tend to be involved in a lot of the cases that maybe the kids are just really struggling with behaviors in the classroom. So looking more on those individual lenses of what can we do even beyond the classroom? What kind of advice can we even be giving to our parents? So I'm a parent of 3 kids, 2 of which are teenage boys. And so just sitting back lately, I've been recognizing my evenings. So I don't know if anybody is familiar with this, how your evenings go. But lately it's been about, 9:30 and I'm exhausted and want to go to bed. And what's happening in my house is my 2 boys are wrestling nonstop. Well, this is after they've been at soccer all day. This is after they've had a full day of, being in school and having balanced meals and as much as I can give them, right? And it's still not enough at the end of their day. So at the end of the day, they're still seeking that proprioceptive input. So what do we do as parents? We get really worked up over this intense need for this wrestling match, right? That their body's craving it. We need to feed the sensory system. But as adults, the first thing we want to do is say, tone it down, stop doing it, just go to bed. I've learned over time, just as a parent and as an OT, I need to let my boys do this. They need to wrestle for about 15 minutes. They need to get that proprioceptive heavy work into their joints, that compression. Once they do this, I need to give them about 5 or 10 minutes to figure out some type of transition. And then what happens? They go to bed and it's a smooth reaction, right? They sleep, they have a great night. We wake up and things are good. If I stop them from doing this wrestling at night, what happens in the morning? They're usually very grumpy. They didn't get a good night's sleep and so forth. So that's just food for thought in terms of what we are doing with our kids at school. We are so good about giving them a lot of deep pressure input, like breathing activities, wall push-ups, carrying heavy objects. We tell our kids in classrooms to wipe down boards. So we have a lot of this push, pull, carry activity. We give them weighted blankets. We give them weighted vests. We talk about compression clothing. So we're really good with pressure. But I think what we're missing in our schools is that more intense proprioceptive input that we have a hard time giving them. And so what do I mean by that? I'm thinking these intense things that they need really do come in a lot of the sports we play. It's jumping and running and hitting and kicking and drumming and falling and wrestling. So how do we mimic some of that with our kids in our schools? And so I always say, let's just try to pair what we're currently doing with just a little bit more intensity. So maybe our kids are doing wall sits, but they're also kicking their legs out one at a time while they're doing their wall sits. Or how can we get them on their bellies just more often throughout the day so that they're putting that joint compression into their shoulders and elbows? So can they read on their bellies? If they're going to be at home, can they play video games on their bellies? I also love a good scooter board. Anytime I can get a kid on a scooter board and use their hands to do that crawling. So all this crawling motion that we give our babies is still good for us as, kids and teens to get that input into joints. So those are some of my go-tos. But again, I think we also need to think about the repetition, but also the level of intensity of our proprioceptive input that we give our kids. So when it really starts to annoy us, it's probably really good for our kids. So how do we encourage some of that crashing at night, jumping, running, kicking, in a healthy and safe way? And that's what I got for you guys.
Yay. You got a lot of amens from Haley and I. We're both like, oh,
Well,
yes.
amens, but I also feel targeted by you, Jackie. If my husband is as bad about this crashing, and I'm like, if you don't stop winding them up before bed, I'm like, in our house, we don't have the square footage for this sort of support. So
Yeah.
that is really helpful though. But I'm even thinking like the wall sits, add kicks. Like those are the little things that you don't have to stop academics to do that either. And I think when we talk OT, somatosensory, proprioceptive, all that good stuff, sometimes I think, at least for myself as a teacher, it took me a while to get over my knee-jerk reaction of, so I have to stop and like organize all 32 of my friends getting into the wall sit position.
Yeah.
And it helps me to say, like, no, not everyone needs to do it, but little Katie can go do a kicking wall sit while I continue to teach or something like that.
And
I
it's
love it.
also amazing. I think it probably would help little Katie. And I think so often our students who are great at tolerating the school day have these really exhaustive, just like, I did it, I did it, I did it. And how amazing, for them to get the same release as a student who's demonstrating it with these big behaviors or by shutting down. I just think that's tremendous. So you got a lot of feedback in the text or in the chat of people saying like, I wish
And
people would know
Jackie,
that.
a couple of people are saying, do you see it with just boys? I know that's your experience because you have two sons, but in your school, are you seeing it with all children across the spectrum?
Yeah, you see it with girls too. My third one is a girl. She's just the younger one, but she gets right in there with them. Usually she's in bed by the time they start the wrestling match. But yeah, after school she's wrestling with them too. And it's just again, it's feeding the sensory system. So proprioceptive input is going to help us if we need to be more aroused. And it's also going to help us calm down. Kids in general are just going to need a different amount fed to them, no matter what their background is or gender is. But it's if we can stop and just hear and listen and see and maybe take us out of the equation of, okay, that's really bugging me, but it's something that they really need. So how do we get them a little bit more intensity, which is usually the harder part of this.
Last question I have for you, Jackie, and anyone else cut me off, but I'm thinking about if that doesn't come naturally to a child, right? If they don't have someone to crash with at home, or if their physical practices are different, is that something you support educators in modeling for kids? Like this is a way to help yourself out?
Yes and no. Again, I always like to listen to the kid to tell me what kind of input they really like. Some kids that are sensory avoiders, they're not going to like a lot of this rough play, rough housing. And so I'm going to probably turn to more of that pressure with them. So I'm going to adjust my proprioceptive inputs to be probably more about pressure and touch and so forth. So again, I'm just really listening to what the kid is craving and then trying to take what their actions are and just tweaking it a little bit. That makes sense.
That's awesome. Well, thank you, Jackie. That's amazing. We're going to pop over to Taylor, who is also an OT expert over here. Taylor, I'm going to spotlight you. Maybe. Yes.
Sounds good. Yeah. So Jackie explained proprioception really, really well. I would say that the population I serve, at least at the lower elementary schools, they are primarily sensory seeking. They have a lot of sensory needs. They have a lot of dysregulation. So one of the things that we've just recently incorporated is a tunnel in the classroom. So I have incorporated that with one of the students. It's getting him extra input into his wrists, into his hands, into his fingers, into his knees. That has been really successful for him. Maybe it won't stay that way. Maybe that'll shift, but that is one way that we've been giving extra input. As far as classroom teachers, you could have kids crawl around on the ground. You could have kids crawl under tables, just to get different input into different joints, because I would say most times we're not wanting them to crawl, but if it's a very structured, very simple, very directed task, that would be a way to get all of your kids, and especially some of those sensory seekers, some more input. The other go-to strategy that I have had, which my son's here, so hopefully he'll help me demonstrate. Can you hold on a second? is joint compressions. Luke, come here. Can I borrow you? So if you straighten their arm up and kind of bend their wrist back and give them input, hold on, can we see? This way. So I do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and I'll relax their arm and ask them if they want more. It gives input into all of their joints going all the way down. And I would say of the 7 kids in my room, a lot of them will often ask for repeats of that. They'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and come over and offer me their arm. The other one that I started doing is, and many of you probably know, the prayer pushes. So you'll just have them push their hands together as hard as they can. And if you do that, you can feel all of the input going into your arms. For one of my kids, I do support that where I push his hands together. And he is, I would say, a pretty intense sensory seeker. So he's actually started where he adapted it himself. He'll curl his fingers if he wants more while I'm pushing, which gives, I would say, an uncomfortable sensation. But he seems to need that at times, and he adapts as we kind of go through that. All of the other things that Jackie had talked about, I mean, the heavy work, carrying heavy items, doing wall push-ups, using a weighted backpack, are all typical things that I use also. Another really important tool that I found for this same kiddo is this oral motor like vibration tool, which you do have to be very careful and make sure parents are aware. So it's just like a toothbrush, which you could probably use an electric toothbrush, but has different heads on it. So he will often use this if we need it at table work. He'll just kind of have this sitting in his mouth. So I've noticed that a lot of my kids are seeking oral motor input too, which is something kind of newer to us this year, I would say. Sorry, I was just looking at the chat.
About, does that, sometimes it says, sometimes they're advised to be careful what we offer without, winding the kids up, or, is that physical sort of, Haley always uses it, is it an upper too much or something? Is there any sort of advice you have around that?
I would say it's really all dependent on watching their body clues. And I would say work closely with your OT to say, if you're noticing this, what should you do instead? Because yeah, it depends on the input, and it's really hard to say what kids are going to respond to and in what time. So I know a lot of people really like swinging as a type of regulation tool, but I have kind of hesitated to say, like, you really have to be careful and watch them, because even linear swinging can cause them to be dysregulated. So a lot of times the dysregulation would look like their voice getting higher, they're fidgeting more. So really it's kind of fine tuning what the different body clues are for that student and what they mean. So it's really, unfortunately, kind of tailored to what the students need. But like I said, the tunnel and these like prayer pushes are things that almost all of my kids have used without issue.
A lot of routine and ritual around that, which I think we see the most success with these things is that early, that early testing out of like what works, what doesn't. And you'll have a few successes, a few missteps, but then when you anchor on those couple things, we often see that students and staff alike are like, we have 5 go-tos, and that's really good for us until maybe it doesn't work. But yeah, that's awesome.
Will you tell Luke thank you?
Yes, thank you.
Solid gem.
Yes. Luke, they said thank you.
Hero of the day.
Well, thank you, Taylor.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Cool. Yeah, lots of good stuff. I think it's interesting. We had a woman who was working with military and first responders, and she said she would practice some of these activities. Yeah, snipers. And she would meet with them and say, okay, here's some of the things you can do to regulate and X and Y and Z. And then, months later, they'd come back to her and they'd say, I did that thing. It didn't work. And she'd say, so you've been practicing a lot. And then the stressful moment happened. And they were like, well, no, I never did it again until that stressful moment. And she was like, well, speaking of efficient repetition. So again, Taylor and Jackie have proposed some amazing things that, even if they work really well, probably have a few bumps in the road when you're figuring it out, you're introducing it, you're getting your class on the page of here's how we crawl through the room, but then it can become a seamless activity that really benefits the crew.
I think this is another, this is such a good chat. I think this is another good example too of why, at least at the network, we're very cautious not to, publish a list of strategies and say, have every kid put their arm up and hit their palm, right? Because if we have this understanding of intimacy and escalation and state dependence, we can say there might be a moment where, little Haley's having a really tough day. And if a teacher walks over and tries to pull her arm above her hand and start tapping on her palm, there's going to be a physical incident, and that might really terrify that child. Or just be, maybe she thinks now we're playing, now we're hitting each other's hands, and that could lead to an extremely escalated situation. Similar to if someone's having a really stressful moment and they haven't practiced, Kelly called it the Jedi, love that, and they haven't practiced the Jedi, maybe that's not the time to teach them. So I think we always say use these through the lens of thinking about the intimacy barrier, thinking about the the dynamics of power and what people are comfortable with, and exactly what Taylor and Jackie both said, which is we observe, right? We observe how people are feeling, and that might be one-on-one or observing your class as well. I think Miss McCool does a good job of talking about she does the best for the most, and it usually supports people in coming along. But I think any teacher, if you started morning meeting with, we're all going to start morning meeting doing some Jedi motions, right? And one kid does it and rolls his fingers in, like she was saying. For some students, this might not be an issue, but then later in April during testing season, you might see a couple of your kids doing this before they start their test, or, releasing their shoulders, whatever it is. So I do think, again, we always say the beauty of having this neurosequential lens behind a lot of these strategies. If you are not an OT like me, I want to be an OT. I think they're so amazing. But if you don't have the full OT background, I can at least say, like, in certain situations, state dependence, what I know about this child, I am not going to walk over and start touching her while she's escalated. I'm going to wait, and we'll teach that skill at a different time, or never use that strategy with that specific child. So
Cool. All right. We have two clips that were submitted prior to today because they had a conflict come up. But Haley will play those. So we're going to hear from Julie and then Kristen McCool. And so they're quick little clips we will share. And then we're going to switch gears over to the maintenance activity after we debrief those.
Great. Sorry, I realized I'm the one sharing that.
With regulation, reading, and writing, one of the things that we've been doing to kind of help him get through these things is our time is supposed to be about 30 minutes reading and writing. And I have just decided to watch how he is doing. And instead of doing the 5 or 6 things, we narrow it down to 3 or 4 things. And then I just wait. And sometimes I notice if he is super dysregulated, maybe we just do 2 or 3 or 2. The other thing that I am constantly trying to do when I'm working with this student is cheer them on, praise their successes. And when they get something wrong, I remind them that everybody makes mistakes. The other thing that I have been trying to do with all of my students is on really nice days. I'm in Wisconsin. On really nice days in the spring, I try to go outside just to have that nature piece in the background, whether it's doing fractions in chalk, whether it is running to do estimation numbers, or just writing numbers down in sequence for other friends. For reading, sometimes I'll have them write trick words on the sidewalk and see how many they can get done in a minute. It is really about watching the student and knowing where they're at, and then determining what and where and how much I can push. Good luck.
My name is Kristen McCool, and I am a special education teacher at Aurora Highlands in Aurora, Colorado. And I actually teach in a autism center-based classroom. So all of my students are pretty moderate to severely impacted with autism. So it's very fun. And I do have a primary teaching job, so I run the classroom for the day. I have 3, 4, 5, depending on the day, paras who support with inclusion. I only do the center-based teaching, so I only do the pull-out services. But my paras support with inclusion. And we have some service providers. We have a speech pathologist, a school psychologist, and an OT and a PT. So we have some providers that come in. I think I probably focus the most on the kids, and also myself, because I know that I cannot be a co-regulator if I'm not regulated. So, but I honestly use the sequence of engagement really pretty much thinking about every single thing I do all the time. I always have to make sure my kids are regulated, because if they're not, if they're overwhelmed with their sensory environment, or their triggers, we're not going anywhere for the day. So for me, I live in this like sequence of engagement all day long. I'm regulating my kids, we're building relationships, and then can we get them to the reasoning part? Can we get them to the learning, which is the priority, right? But it's very interesting because in my classroom, we spend a lot of the time in the regulation area. I would say relationships for kids, like my students, tend to come pretty easily. They have very specific preferred people. And if those people aren't around, or if those people aren't available, that can be hard. So we live in this very relational, like it's like a family. It's so close, and which can be very tricky. These kids need continuity. They're not very flexible. They're pretty rigid in terms of being able to have relationships with people, and they don't tend to be relational with each other. So they're primarily relational with adults. So I have to always be thinking about who's in the room, which is hard because with a staff that's so large, I have people pretty much out every day. So we have subs coming in. When the subs come in, it's so hard because the kids don't know them. We see spontaneous behaviors that we don't normally see. So, I mean, like I literally am constantly focused on who are they interacting with? How are they interacting with that person? Is that person doing what they need in that moment? And then how are all of these things playing together to keep them regulated so that they can access the learning? And I mean, I would say probably, this is terrible, probably 70% of my day is spent regulating kids, and 30% is spent in like actually intensive instruction. And even in any given moment, like in a small group, for instance, like I run a literacy rotation and the groups are 15 minutes. Even within that 15-minute period, a kid might be regulated for 2 minutes in order to learn. So, I mean, because I have so many guest teachers or guest paras in my room on a daily basis, I pretty much have to have the same spiel with them every day. I have the sequence of engagement posted on my wall by my door. I'm the only classroom, I think, in the building that does, but I came from a different school. So I usually tell them, like, if you see a behavior, it's not because they're defiant. And this is different, right? Because it's not going to be the same in other ways in other buildings. But in my classroom, these kids are having behaviors generally because they're dysregulated. And usually it's related to some kind of sensory, like external. Sometimes their inside world is loud. I imagine some of their brains are really, really loud. You know what I mean? But I just tell the people who are coming in every day, like, if you need to remove yourself, you're welcome to. But if they're dysregulated, like our jobs are to keep them safe, to protect them, and to help them learn. And so we have to do what we have to do to make sure that that happens every day. So, I mean, and I'm hardcore, like original gen ed teacher, like I want kids to learn every day. So even if I get that 10% or 5%, like, you know, I have to tell people like our goal is to get them regulated enough to be able to get some learning in every day. So we actually developed a Relate for Learning flowchart and a Regulate for Learning. So the Regulate for Learning kind of looks at somatosensory, reflective dissociation, co-regulation, mental refocus, and cognitive self-regulation. It talks about what each of those areas are, and then it talks about here's exactly what you can do to regulate a kid. So for example, somatosensory is so easy, right? If a kid needs physical bodily regulation, either to calm their bodies or to increase, you either move them or you put on calming work. So in my classroom, it looks like we do a lot of brain breaks. So we got to get our bodies moving. We got to get that physical energy out. But sometimes we got to flow down. Like I say flow because I think all the time we do yoga, like literally all the time we do yoga. And I just kind of have to read them to see where they are. And so one kid might be on the complete opposite spectrum, and that's okay. Like you said, I kind of have to pull everybody along. We do what's best for the most. Reflective or co-regulation is easy, things that they're doing to interact with adults. Again, my kids not necessarily interacting with each other, but they can see us interacting with other peers, and we can kind of model what that looks like. So it's a learning and co-regulation. So that's kind of like the regulate piece, and then the relate for learning. We developed some strategies which are really about just providing opportunities to model how to be relational. And so using those dosing moments to really be explicit and teaching, like when I need to learn how to interact with someone or be social, here's how I do it. It's cool because with autism, that's like a cornerstone of the disability, is that they struggle to interact with other people. So it's cool for me because I get to use those moments every day to teach them how to be social and also how to use that to calm themselves down. So it's fun for me. Yeah, we today, I mean, I have a couple of really big behaviors, but today I have one of my kiddos who's pretty hard behavior wise. Like she has some pretty
Yeah,
big behaviors. Again, like not defiance, just who she is.
sure.
And she was really wanting to interact with her peers. And, you know,
Okay.
we talk about like, if you're going to be around them, like you have to have calm hands and a calm body. And so she got like really close to him and she was whispering and she was like trying to get
Cute.
right in his eye contact. And I just thought, I was like, oh my gosh, like here's a kid who I'd say like most of my class is pretty frightened of for the most part,
Sure.
but she wants to relate so bad. And she's like
That's so
practicing
cool.
practice.
Sorry for the double version of me. But yeah, so I mean, I love how she keeps saying so easy. It's so easy. And you're like, maybe if you are Miss McCool, who is clearly
But
very
also,
cool.
who doesn't want to be a teacher with the name Miss McCool?
Yes. So
That's awesome.
Kristen, we thank you when you watch this video. We're closing in on the end, so I don't want to cut conversation short, and we're happy to hang out longer, but I do want to preview the maintenance activity for those of you who would like to know what that is and what is coming. And then we have some resources and other materials, but to ground everyone in what we're talking about, every May we do a maintenance activity with the Neurosequential Model and Education crew. So this is folks who have gone through the NME trainer program, the NME advanced trainer program, and maybe the new implementation series. So basically, if you're part of the NME community, we've done one of those trainings, we ask that you do this maintenance activity every May. It's open through July 31st. And advanced trainers, this is where we really look to you to make sure your network knows. So those you have trained, have access, know this is happening, and get it entered before July 31st. We're doing a hard stop just because we had a long trickle this year and it sort of happened all the way out until April. And so we really want to kind of close that down at July 31st. And that gives us our listserv for the year. It lets us know who's still practicing, who still wants to be involved, who would like not to receive any more emails from the network because they are enjoying, life on a beach in their retirement somewhere. But we're always happy to have you involved. So
For a quick example, we've been sending out a monthly reminder for 2 whole months now about this implementation call with the information, the articles, whatever it is. If you didn't receive that email, it's based on the list we built off of last year's maintenance activity. So, and I can, are you going to share?
either way.
All right. I think, is it me? Am I sharing my own sound? All right. Let's do that. All right. Thanks, team. Sorry. Talk about dysregulating, hearing your own voice in 7 layers.
Okay.
Yeah, you got it. Okay. So this is in your implementation section of the new website. Again, the only reason you need to go to the older website, the dashboard, is to input classroom functional maps, or if you want some of those supplemental reading articles. Nothing else lives there. Everything else is in our new site. And so if you go into the NME implementation and community calls section, go to the recording links. This is the link for today's call, is the NME annual maintenance activity. So again, we really want to be responsive to the community. What do you want to hear? Who do you want to hear more from? What materials would support you? Dr. Perry does a great job of reminding us that the NM is research based. So it has to be changing, right? Because we are learning more. We are shifting what we know. Therefore, we want to make updates, but we want to let you know that we're making updates so no one's using, information that's out of date, slides that are out of date, or they just don't feel like they're attending the implementation calls because they don't have the link or whatever that is. So this is really your chance to share information with us, to let us know that, you like our brilliant presenters today. This was just, we went into the maintenance activity from last year. We looked at who marked occupational therapist,
Classroom teachers.
yeah. And we pulled, or people who had written in the bottom, I would like to share about X, Y, and Z, because there is a section for that. And we sent out an email, and some of them were like, no way, I'm really busy that Thursday. And we said, that's wonderful. Thank you for replying. And others said, I'm available to share. So we really do love to know. Also, Katie and I are just the two of us. We get requests all the time. Do you know someone in this area who's doing a book study? Do you know someone who's this or that? And it is our goal to promote all of the amazing things you all are doing, to share your brilliance within the boundaries you set for us, to have events like in Arizona where all the NM people just get together and have a conference. And it was wonderful. Or getting to see a con present in California was a joy for me. So all of those things happen by us continuing to tighten and grow our network. So also, Akan, you got to share more. You're hilarious.
Yes.
So we gotta respect anyone's boundaries, of course, but as much as you want to connect or share or let us know. We're happy to hear it.
There's two things. So one, you'll definitely need to be able to log into both sites to complete this. So as you move through, you'll be prompted. At one point, it does ask you about a hidden word. So that's purely just to make sure you all can navigate to where you need to navigate. So I will show you, you'll at one point go to the slides and FAQs. You'll click on slides and FAQs, and there's a hidden phrase. So you'll enter that in. It's just to give you a fun scavenger hunt to spice up your day.
This is also when we find out that the NME program hasn't been loaded. So you can log in, but there's something on the back end we need to do to give you the right program. So often these are technical issues, and people are like, well, I just thought I didn't have access anymore. We want you to have access to everything. So this is our best way to sort of scavenger hunt to all of the things we can support you with.
Yep. And then Haley will share this on her screen, or I can pull it up. But we also, one of the big things is that we're shifting the NME implementation call schedule this year. So we will not be doing as many of these implementation calls. We'll do about 5 of
What
those.
am I sharing?
The implementation
Right now,
calls.
it's just my whole screen.
That's okay.
Okay.
We'll get there. But what we can, what we'll do is we'll send out that new schedule. You'll see that there's going to be a couple of implementation calls that happen every year, but then we're also going to have office hours every other month where folks can come and bring a functional map. There's going to be one call a year that's going to be a content review. So that will be, for those who are just like, you know what, I need an anchoring, what content have we covered this year? What can I focus on? Things like that. And then we're also going to have an annual advanced trainer call where the advanced trainers will come to those, that call once a year, and we can catch up on, what they're learning, need to know to lead a group, things like that. So that is also shared in that maintenance activity, and you'll be able to access that when you work through it. And we'll, as always, send updates on what's going to happen in those calls, what the content will be. And of course, if any of you are willing to participate, we would love to have you be part of that. So those are things to look forward in there. Again, anyone in your network who is part of this, we would really, really appreciate that they fill this out. It's our best indicator that they're part of the community, and they're going to keep being part of the community. We also have information on what trainings are coming up and things like that. So we're slowly narrowing in on those moments where folks are like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that existed. And our goal is really to shift and make sure that you know everything existed and you're able to access it the minute it's available, and you feel like you have a lot of support with that. So we'll open it up to questions, but I know we're right at the hour. But we appreciate all those that presented. We look forward to hearing from many more of you in months to come, and have a really wonderful May.
If you're sending students off to graduation or continuation, I hope you're feeling great and supported and joyful and getting what you need. So it's always so good to see all of you.
And I'll put this implementation call schedule link in the chat as well for folks to see that too.
Yeah, thank you all. Thank you so much, team. One of my new both of my new study groups have a bunch of OTs in it. So you can see, I think I told you all, I think OTs are just so cool to talk to.
Nice.
And Emily Perry, as the schedule shifts, because it will shift for the community calls as well. Emily, she's so wonderful, will continue to share information about that and make sure everyone's updated on it. And you can never bother us. You're always more than welcome to send us an email. All right.
Take care.
Good to see you all.